In this lesson, we're talking about evaluating and improving relationships. We'll talk about factors that end relationships, the various stages of relationships, how to evaluate and how to improve relationships. So I've included the words in young people here for a particular reason. Factors that end relationships in young people. I think it's a little different in older people. And the easiest way to say that is older people bring with them some baggage. So we're talking about young people who are kind of starting fresh in the world of friendships or dating relationships, what have you. So that's why this specifically says factors that end relationships in young people. And you'll see exactly why when we start to go over them. So one is the failure to anticipate differences. So, in an early relationship, people tend to focus on the things that are so alike, all the similarities. Oh, we both like this music. Oh, we both love that movie. Oh, we both are really fans of this show. So we focus so much on the similarities that we don't often think about as young people, the differences that may come up. And sometimes those differences, if you don't anticipate them, they can blindside you and just be kind of shattering when they do arise. Also, the idea of a 50-50 relationship. So there's a cartoon that I watch. And if you know me, you know that I watch a lot of cartoons. Anyway, where this little girl tells her little boyfriend that relationships aren't 50-50, they should be 100-100. And as silly as it is that came from a cartoon, and I probably shouldn't tell you, but it came from South Park. Anyway, so this idea that relationships should be 50-50 means that each person is giving half. So if each person gives 100% of themselves, then that could be a better relationship. The thing is, can you always give 100% of yourself? And the answer to that is obviously no. I mean, some days the best you can do might be, I'll give you 40% today. Today, you get the best 40% of me today as far as being a friend, or this is a bad week for me. And you kind of cut out a little bit. So it's not always 50-50, and it can't always be 100-100, but the idea that the other person is going to give as much as they take can be overwhelming for some people who are young when they realize that that's not always going to happen. Also, the idea of that young people aren't always able to anticipate conflict. This goes back to strategic flexibility, being able to anticipate conflict. Also, failure to cope with life's trials. And there are a lot for young people. Young people today have so much more to deal with than young people did when I was a young people. So there's a lot going on, a lot of stress, a lot of expectations, lots of issues that young people have to deal with today. So it's a lot to learn to deal with, and it's hard to anticipate that when you don't know. Now, when you're older and you've been through a few trials and tribulations, then it's a lot easier to anticipate. So, keep that in mind. It gets easier. Also, a fantasy view of love. So that, to me, I think is one of the biggest ones that young people who maybe, and we're talking about this relationship specifically being a romantic relationship, but the idea of love and a perfect love. Well, people aren't perfect, and things aren't always going to be perfect. So this idea that a love could be perfect is really skewed, and it's something that young people don't have a lot of experience with yet. But as they get older, they get their baggage before they get older, and they start to have different understandings at that point. So here are the relationship stages when a relationship is coming together. So there's some sort of initiation of the relationship. Maybe you're texting, maybe you're talking, depending on where you are, how you met. Maybe you ask the person out or they ask you out. Maybe there's a date or a hangout. Then there's kind of this experimenting aspect of the relationship where you hang out as a group with your friends. Then it intensifies where you're hanging out more. Then relationship stage 4 is when you start integrating and incorporating. So you may change plans to do what the other person wants to do. And the 5th stage would be bonding, or this closeness that develops from all of this time that you've spent together. Now, this very much, because it mentions dating and hanging out, this very much sounds like a dating relationship, but I do want to mention too, this could also be a stage of a friend relationship that's starting, where you just initiate, hey, do you want to study? We've got this class together. You found some common ground. Do you want to study the night before the test? Yeah, sure. Okay, great. And then they text and say, hey, do you want me to bring some chips? Whatever. Then it becomes a conversation, and then you're hanging out. And so then maybe the next thing is like, maybe they ask you, do you want to study Thursday night? And maybe your response is, I've got plans Thursday night, but hey, you want to go with us? We're going to go to a movie. And then there you are hanging out. So this is very much kind of the beginning stages of a friendship, not just a dating relationship too. So here's how relationships kind of start to come apart. One, where in the beginning, you're finding all of these similarities with each other. Maybe now you're starting to find some differences. Maybe you're starting to avoid those differences, which is called circumscribing. Nothing new is going on in the relationship, so it becomes stagnant. Then maybe you start avoiding the person, or maybe they start avoiding you. I believe young people call it ghosting today. And then also terminating or ending the relationship. Now, sometimes if we're talking about a friendship, unless you're in 3rd grade, I mean, you probably don't say, I'm not going to be your friend anymore. But friendship wise, this could be just absolutely, maybe not picking up the phone for a phone call when they call, or maybe not texting back, or texting back and saying, I'm busy, and just nothing more than that, whatever. But the end of the relationship in a friendship doesn't seem as final as a termination. It's just kind of, you just stop hanging out. So in a dating relationship, however, though, the idea of terminating the relationship, there's a lot of expectation around that. Don't want to go out anymore, but maybe we can just be friends, or hope we can still be friends, or it's not you, it's me, whatever, whatever that situation may be. It's okay to terminate a relationship. If you're the one who wants to terminate a relationship, if it's not healthy for you, if there are too many differences, maybe one of the differences that you found is that you don't do drugs and they do. Well, you don't want to be in that situation, then definitely in the relationship. And you can say, hey, there's just some differences, or I don't feel comfortable around drug use or whatever, or just, don't continue the relationship. Now, if it's a dating relationship and you feel like you need to give a reason, then you could always mention that too. Or, hey, I just think that we're not working out, but I hope we can still be friends. That's pretty simple. Always keep it simple and honest. Be honest. Okay, relationship diagram. I think this is important because we see these as stairs. And the thing about going upstairs is that you can go down them. You can also go back up them, and you can go down them again. So while we talk about initiating a friendship as moving up and ending a relationship as going down, it's not that It's not just that simple. You don't just build to a friendship and then go, no more, and fall off. There are different stages. I mean, and these are all numbered here, so you can see that, but you could go up like as the relationship's coming together. Maybe you go up to step 1 and then you're at step 2 for a long time. And then you step up to 3, and then all of a sudden you're up to 4, and then you're 5, and then you start coming apart. You find those differences. But instead of moving down to avoidance, maybe you go, oh, but those differences are cool. I like those differences. So then maybe you go back up to the bond again. You can go up or down these, and you can, they're just different stages. It may take you a long time to get to the part of terminating a relationship. I know the friend specifically that I mentioned in my example earlier about sorority pledging was something that didn't end until, let's see, I guess we'd been out of college for 20 years. And at that point, the relationship just wasn't a healthy one for me anymore. I had married, I had a child, and she was going through some things, and it was taking time away from my infant. So, at that particular point, we're still friendly, but we're not best friends anymore. And that's okay. That's a decision that was made, based on my needs in that particular case, but I've been on the receiving end of that too. So anyway, you can see how people go up to build friendships, and then friendships can come apart too. This can happen in any kind of relationship, not just a dating relationship. So when you're evaluating your relationships, we're talking specifically about interpersonal communication. So we're talking about two people here. So there are questions you should ask about the other person, but there are definitely questions you should ask about yourself too. If you find that a relationship isn't working for you, ask yourself, are you afraid of commitment? Are you afraid of forming a long-term relationship with another person? If so, why? Those are great reasons to talk to a counselor. Are you afraid of making a commitment to this particular relationship or this particular person? And if that's the case, maybe that's a red flag. Just saying. Also, do you fear losing your sense of who you are? I see this a lot more often in terms of romantic relationships instead of friendship relationships, because it seems like most of the time we choose our friends to accentuate who we are or what we want to be. But the idea of losing your own sense of who you are to another person generally tends to pop up when we're talking about romantic relationships. So here are questions to ask about your partner or friend. Are they open and honest? Do they tell me the truth? Do they have a strong self-concept? Do they think highly of themselves? And is that a healthy self-perception? Do they think too highly of themselves? Do they think more of themselves than they do me? Do they think that they're lucky, or that I'm lucky that they talk to me? That should be a red flag. Are they aware of the time investment that it would take to create a long-term relationship? And are they willing to put forth that effort? What's their perspective on commitment? And are they ready to prioritize a partner? So you can ask yourself those questions, whether this is a friend or a potential life partner, but they're good questions to look at. We'll look at some additional questions here in just a minute, I think. Yes, we do. Okay, so in evaluating relationships, weigh the rewards versus the cost. And this goes back to that social exchange theory that we talked about in the last lesson, the idea that we all benefit something from our relationships. We set out to develop relationships that we can benefit from. So are those rewards extrinsic, and what are the rewards and the cost? So extrinsic means, are they surface or exterior rewards? Like, are you going to get something from being friends or in a relationship with this person? I know my brother used to tell me that, hey, look, you can fall in love with a rich man or a poor man, but just saying, wouldn't hurt if you fell in love with a rich man. Anyway, that would be an extrinsic reward. An intrinsic reward would be more of an emotional aspect, something interior. So an emotional reward, like, I would say that most of my friendships have an intrinsic reward. I mean, that emotional bond of a friendship. And instrumental rewards and costs, like task and chores. So what kind of, does your relationship seem like a chore? If it does, what's the reward and what's the cost of that? Evaluating relationship roles is also important. And this is especially true if you're looking at this relationship conversation as a life partner, not a friendship, but a romantic relationship. It's important for you to know, and for you to know this about the other person too. What do you want in a spouse or a life partner? What are your expectations? What are their expectations for the same thing? Who do you think should be financially responsible for supporting the family? These days it's kind of hard for just one person to do that, but it's still a good question to ask. Who do you think should be responsible for financially supporting the family? And do you agree with that? How do you feel about that? How do they feel about that? The last thing you would want to do would be to enter a long-term relationship with someone without having this question addressed, because you may think that, oh, we'll get married and I'll stay home with the kids and my partner will be the breadwinner. And that may not be, your partner's idea at all. Who's going to be responsible for the housework? Or are we going to split that? How does splitting that look? What about child discipline? Who's going to be responsible for that? Are we going to split that? What kind of theories do you have about that? Those are important things to know about yourself and about the other person. Also, I love this question. What determines who will be the boss in a marriage? Anyway, it needs to be addressed. Is there going to be a boss in your marriage? Is this going to be a partnership? How is that partnership going to work? And what do you expect from that partnership? What did they expect from that partnership? They're all very important questions to ask yourself. And you need to be able to ask the other person these questions as well. Also, what about children? Do you want children? Do they want children? What's your timeline for having children? If someone says, yeah, I want kids someday, well, someday maybe 20 years in the future, and someone else may want children right away. So it's important to have that conversation before your relationship gets to a very late point. So how can you improve relationships? It's really very easy. You can communicate. So aggressive talk and aggression are seen as harsh and inconsiderate. So you would not want to do that. You would not want to use regrettable talk, which is what happens when you talk without thinking. Also, criticism and complaints. You always is like the worst argument that someone could give you, because you always isn't true. I mean, there's not something that we always do. So when that comes out, it's a tipping point. I mean, instead of that criticism, you always do this or you always do that, a better way to discuss a problem in a relationship instead of saying, you always spend too much money. Oh, okay. Well, that's not always the case, because there have been times when you didn't spend too much money, for sure. So a better argument with that would be, I'd like to talk with you about the amount of money you spent on this particular date. I mean, if that's what made you mad, then that's the thing you should talk about. Also, avoidance is getting the silent treatment, which does not improve relationships either, because if you really want to improve your relationship, instead of giving someone the silent treatment, you should focus on talking things out. Now, I say that with this caveat. Sometimes it's a good idea to take a little time to gather your thoughts before you start this conversation, because you can go into it too quickly and end up with a lot of regrettable talk. But avoiding talking altogether is not going to do anything. One of my, the conversations that I have with some of my friends really kind of crack me up. I'm really happy to say that in my relationship with my husband, we do communicate a lot, and we're able to talk about all sorts of things. And if I have a problem, I'll tell him. If he has a problem, he'll tell me. But I have a friend who says, my husband never does anything around the house. Okay, well, so there's the never. That's an absolute term. So I know it's not exactly right, but I also know that she's mad, and I'm not going to correct her on it. I'm just going to let her talk. And what she's talking about specifically, because he does do things around the house for her kids or for their kids and everything. But what he doesn't do is what she wants him to do. Like she says he doesn't mow when the yard needs to be mowed, or he doesn't, like there's this fence that he was supposed to build for a long time and hasn't done yet. Anyway, so my question to her is, have you told him? She's like, no, I shouldn't have to. Like, have you talked to him about the timeline for it? Nope, I shouldn't have to. That's as good as avoidance. If you're not talking about it and she just stays mad, the longer it goes undone, the madder she gets. And the madder he gets, because he knows she's mad and she says, nothing's wrong, because her response to that is, if he doesn't know, he should know. I shouldn't have to tell him what's wrong. He should know what's wrong. Anyway, the best, easiest way to improve relationships is to communicate. That doesn't mean talking something into the ground. It doesn't mean coming back and talking about it 100 different times, but get the closure that you need and help your partner get the closure that they need to.